Hey guys, tonight we're entering a world that makes modern dating apps look like paradise. Medieval marriage. Forget roses, chocolate, or swiping left on people who still live with their mom. In the Middle Ages, marriage wasn't about finding your soulmate, it was about survival, livestock, and which relative your parents were desperate to unload you on. If you think your in-laws are bad, just wait until your wedding night comes with a legal contract, a goat, and a priest judging your bedsheets. So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you, preferably not during your own anniversary dinner. Now, dim the lights, put on a fan for that gentle medieval draft, get comfortable, and maybe lock your bedroom door just in case your family has arranged a surprise marriage for you. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what marriage was like before it mostly meant sharing streaming passwords? Were medieval weddings romantic candlelit affairs? Or more like jury duty with extra livestock? Did brides get cold feet? Or just actual frostbite? What did people wear, eat, and regret? How many relatives crammed into your house on wedding night? What if you didn't want to get married? Did Tinder exist? Or did you just get thrown at the neighbor's son like a sack of grain? And what exactly happens when you're stuck with someone who bathes once a year and thinks pillow talk means literally discussing pillows? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1382. You're 19, which means you're already late to the marriage market. Your family's plotting, your neighbors are gossiping, and someone's sharpening the family goat for a dowry. Let's see how long you last. Welcome to the medieval marriage market, basically eBay, but with fewer user protections and way more livestock. You're not meeting someone special, you're being assessed, traded, and possibly exchanged for 3 sheep and a slightly dented plough. Your parents negotiate your future while you practice smiling through existential dread. Think of it as The Bachelor, but with more uncles, and everyone's got lice. Let's set the scene. You're somewhere between the ages of 12 and 19, which in medieval years means you're overdue for nuptials and basically an old maid or ancient bachelor. Your parents have been scheming since you could walk, quietly networking at every village feast, harvest festival, and church service. You thought Aunt Edith was just asking about your health, but really, she was gathering intel for your marriage profile. Strong teeth, steady gait, only cries a little at thunder. That's premium real estate in the love market. The suitors begin to arrive. They aren't dreamy mystery men or blushing beauties with poetry in their hearts. No, your prospects are generally local Benedict, the neighbour's son, who smells faintly of turnip and disappointment, or maybe Matilda, who has most of her own teeth and can carry 2 buckets at once. These aren't blind dates. They're pre-screened by the town gossip network for family standing, land, and any mysterious skin rashes that might indicate the bad blood. But don't worry, it's not all grim. There's excitement in the air, the crackle of possibility, the scent of freshly baked bread, the distant screaming of someone's pig. The village green fills with families touting their eligible children like prized root vegetables at the fair. Mothers boast about their daughters' embroidery skills, fathers show off sons with sturdy calves and the ability to count past 10. You stand there, cheeks flushed, trying not to look too eager, or worse, too desperate. Now, if you're lucky, your family is relatively respected, your fields are producing, and no one in your immediate bloodline was recently executed for petty theft. This increases your value in the market. The negotiations begin. Parents circle each other, low-key interrogating potential in-laws about their harvests, their debts, and, subtly, where the madness runs in the family. There's bargaining, bartering, and sometimes thinly veiled threats. It's the original Meet the Parents, except instead of awkward small talk, it's tense haggling over how many hens your future happiness is worth. And let's not forget the livestock. Cows, sheep, and even a particularly handsome chicken can sway a deal. Got a daughter who can churn butter without looking miserable? She's worth a goat and half an acre. Son can read a little Latin? Maybe throw in a piglet. The market is ruthless. Sometimes, You're the one being offered. Other times, you're being sized up like a slightly bruised apple at the bottom of the basket. The best you can do is stand up straight, say your prayers, and hope your mother doesn't mention your embarrassing rash in front of your potential future spouse. Of course, the most important part of the marriage market isn't love, it's alliances. Marriages aren't about happily ever after. They're about consolidating land, ending feuds, or keeping that one annoying cousin from inheriting everything. If your parents play their cards right, your wedding could mean a new field to plough, or, if you're unlucky, just a slightly less drafty house. The process can drag on for weeks or even months. You endure endless meetings, all carefully chaperoned by family, the priest, and whatever livestock wandered inside. Prospective mothers-in-law ask invasive questions. Prospective fathers-in-law check your teeth. At some point, you'll be handed a cup of weak ale and told to look grateful. That's your cue to nod, try not to spill, and pray nobody mentions the goat incident of last year. By the end of it, you'll either be paired off, celebrated as a minor miracle, or left behind until next year's market, when hopefully your value will have increased. Either way, your fate rests in the hands of your parents, your local priest, and the current price of barley. It's not personal, it's just business. And in the medieval marriage market, business is booming. Before you can tie the knot, someone has to put a price on your head. And by price, I mean dowry. A fascinating medieval blend of cash, chickens, and your mum's last good spoon. Your family is busy bargaining, and your value depends on things like how many teeth you have left, whether your father owes taxes, and the goat's current mood. Romance. Let's be honest. The medieval dowry system is a game nobody remembers the rules to. But everyone's playing for keeps. If you're a bride, the dowry is your golden ticket. Well, more like a slightly tarnished copper one. Your family assembles your life savings, a few hand-me-down linens, and whatever livestock hasn't mysteriously disappeared this year. These treasures will be handed over to your new husband's family as both an incentive and a bribe. Please, for the love of all that is holy, take her off our hands. But don't get too smug if you're the groom. You and your family are expected to cough up the bride price, a sum of money, a bit of land, or, in desperate times, just a firm handshake and the promise you'll stop poaching Lord Geoffrey's rabbits. This isn't just a financial exchange, it's an unspoken contest about who can appear the least desperate while still being extremely, extremely desperate. Negotiations take place in kitchens, on muddy roads, and, sometimes, in the shadow of the village well, where privacy is an illusion and the chickens are always listening. Your parents haggle over every item. That candlestick is real pewter, I'll have you know. Or, our Matilda can knit 3 socks at once. Surely that's worth a cow upgrade. Your future in-laws, meanwhile, eye your family's donkey as if it might drop dead any minute. Somewhere in the chaos, the priest shows up, nods wisely, and offers to bless the proceedings for a modest fee, of course. Of course, your dowry isn't just about material goods. Your value is carefully scrutinized by all parties. Can you bake a loaf of bread that doesn't double as a weapon? Do you own a comb? Is your singing voice less cursed banshee and more tolerable at festivals? And then there are your teeth, white, straight, and most importantly, present. Medieval dental care is mostly hope for the best, so a full mouth of teeth is like driving a brand new ox cart. Everyone is impressed and slightly jealous. If your family is rich and respectable, your dowry might include a bolt of fine cloth, a gleaming copper pot, or even, scandal of scandals, a chest of coins. If your family is slightly less well off, well, you're entering marriage with a sack of barley, 2 angry chickens, and a very nervous look in your eye. The pressure is real. Your parents want you to marry up, but not so far up that everyone at the feast whispers about that poor girl who brought nothing but a lumpy mattress and a haunted butter churn. And if you're on the other end, judging someone else's dowry, remember, it's not polite to look too eager. Sure, that milk cow looks healthy now, But can she survive winter, or is she just faking it for the crowd? These are the questions that keep medieval mothers awake at night. Sometimes dowries come with strings attached. Maybe your mother insists that you take her prized soup ladle, which she'll absolutely ask to borrow every Sunday for the rest of your natural life. Or maybe there's a family curse. Don't mind the ghost, he's mostly quiet, bundled in with the bundle of linens. And occasionally, the dowry is promised but never actually appears, leading to years of family feuds, angry letters, and the occasional fistfight at a midsummer fair. At the end of the day, your worth on the medieval marriage market isn't measured in love letters or poetry, but in how many sacks of flour you can drag to the altar. Your new life together begins with a formal exchange of assets, a round of forced smiles, and the subtle knowledge that everyone in the village knows exactly what you're worth and how many spoons you had to give up to get it. So next time you hear someone complain about the price of love, just remember, at least nobody's haggling over your best chicken in the churchyard. Yet. You might have dreams, hobbies, or even a secret crush. Too bad. You're betrothed by age 7, and your biggest relationship decision is whether to wear your one clean tunic for the ceremony. Medieval engagement isn't about love, it's about locking in deals before the bride runs off or the groom catches something mysterious in the river. Let's set the mood. You're not even tall enough to reach the good apples on the tree, and already your fate is being sealed over a lukewarm ale and a handshake between adults who can't spell your name. You're paraded around like prized livestock, only slightly less valuable than an actual cow, while your family and your future in-laws argue about who gets to name the first child and whether your freckles are a sign of divine blessing or just bad luck. In theory, betrothal is a joyful, solemn contract. In practice, it's more like being drafted onto a sports team you've never heard of, playing a game with rules that change every Sunday. You stand awkwardly in the churchyard, or your family's smoky main room, surrounded by relatives, priests, and livestock, while the grown-ups hammer out the fine print. If you're lucky, someone gives you a sticky honey cake to keep you quiet while the grown-ups barter your future. The ceremony itself is brisk. There's a priest, some muttered Latin, a quick yes or nod if you're still awake, and suddenly you're engaged. No fancy ring, maybe a borrowed ribbon, a whittled wooden token, or if your family is especially committed, an IOU scrawled on the back of a bread crust. Your new fiancé or fiancée is likely just as confused as you are, staring at you with the same wide-eyed terror you feel inside. If you're both under 10, you might just shake hands, then race off to catch frogs together. Because what else do you do when your wedding is at least 6 harvests away? What's the rush? Well, in a world where survival is a full-time job, families don't mess around with romance. Locking down a good match early means security, land, and fewer surprises. There's always the looming threat that someone's family will run out of money, contract the plague, or get accused of heresy before the deal is done. Nothing motivates a medieval parent like fear of a rival family swooping in to snap up your betrothed and their potentially lucrative goose. From here on out, your life changes. Suddenly, you're spoken for. Every other kid on the green is told to keep their distance, and you're expected to remember the first name of someone you only see at Christmas feasts and funerals. Family gatherings become mini summits, with your mother whispering, "Don't get dirty. Your betrothed's family is watching." Every scraped knee is a diplomatic incident, and every lost tooth is a crisis in marital negotiations. Of course, not every betrothal lasts. If a better match appears, the grown-ups can quietly dissolve the deal, preferably before anyone has announced it to the whole village, but not always. Nothing says medieval heartbreak like being dumped for someone with 2 cows and a nicer set of rushes. Occasionally, tragedy strikes, a fever, a fall, or just a case of terminal wanderlust. In those cases, the deal is called off with as much dignity as you can muster when you're 7 and covered in mud. There are, of course, exceptions. Some families wait until the bride is a whopping 12 or 13 before sealing the deal, mostly because they need another farmhand for one more harvest. But for most, Childhood is less about play and more about preparation. You learn how to knead bread, spin wool, and, if you're really ambitious, spell your future surname. And that's it. You're engaged, a child with a contract. Love isn't on the table yet. For now, your job is to survive childhood. Without embarrassing your family, keep your tunic mostly clean, and practice smiling politely at the person who, someday, you'll call spouse, assuming neither of you is traded for a better offer before then. Medieval romance, coming soon but probably not for you. Every medieval village has one, the relentless matchmaker. Aunt Marjorie knows everyone's secrets and has a chart for who can marry whom, based mostly on rumours and livestock compatibility. You don't choose your match, Aunt Marjorie does, and if you cross her, you might end up married to a guy who smells like boiled cabbage. Let's set the scene. You're minding your own business, daydreaming about escaping the family goat, when you feel the icy gaze of Aunt Marjorie scanning the village square. She appears, as always, at precisely the moment you have hay in your hair and dirt on your knees. In her hand, the infamous ledger, a mysterious notebook where she records every birth, death, and embarrassing rash in the parish. Her matchmaking instincts are sharper than the village scythe. No one escapes her scrutiny, not the miller's awkward son, not the widowed blacksmith, and definitely not you. Aunt Marjorie doesn't operate alone. Your best friend, your granny, the milkmaid, each a willing spy, bribed with fresh gossip or the promise of not being next on the matchmaking list. Marjorie knows who's fighting, who's hiding a second chicken, and which family had a suspiciously early baby. She's the medieval internet, a living, breathing social network with one mission: ensure no eligible villager goes unpaired. Her matchmaking logic is legendary. Are you good at churning butter? She'll find someone who owns a cow. Strong back? She'll pair you with a family whose fence hasn't been mended since the Crusades. Once, she matched her own cousin to a distant relative purely because they both had distinctive elbows. Romance is optional. Livestock compatibility is law. It's less Romeo and Juliet and more Noah's Ark. If Noah was obsessed with making sure everyone had at least one useful animal, Marjorie's methods are direct and inescapable. She'll corner you at the well, catch you on the way to Mass, or, worst of all, drag you onto the dance floor at the next feast and loudly declare your single status. This one's still available. She'll cry, waving her ledger for all to see, as if she's auctioning off last season's potatoes. You'll blush, your mother will apologize, and your father will just stare at his boots, wishing for an early frost. Say you're unlucky enough to pique Aunt Marjorie's disfavor. Maybe you rolled your eyes during her last friendly advice or refused to dance with her nephew. Bad move. Next thing you know, you're being introduced to Edgar, who hasn't bathed since Lent and eats onions like apples. Marjorie's revenge matches are legendary. Village legend says one particularly mouthy girl was once paired with a shepherd who only spoke to sheep, and they're still communicating in bleats to this day. But even if you're spared the worst, Marjorie's influence hangs over your head. She arranges accidental meetings behind the market stalls, drops subtle hints about your favourite colour to prospective in-laws, and knows exactly when to start the rumour mill churning. If you try to rebel, say you develop a crush on the baker's apprentice with suspiciously nice hair, she'll find a way to sabotage your romantic ambitions. Suddenly, everyone's talking about how the baker's family is cursed with weak ankles, and you're being invited to dinner at the pig farmer's house instead. Her greatest power, though, is the fear of being left unmatched. In a world where marriage is survival, nobody wants to become the cautionary tale. So you play along, try to smile, and practice looking grateful when Marjorie announces your engagement to someone who owns exactly the right number of chickens. And here's the wild part. Sometimes, just sometimes, she's right. The odd couple ends up happy, sharing a laugh in the cabbage patch or co-parenting a record-setting turnip. Even Marjorie can't predict love, but she can ensure everyone's at least given the chance, or at the very least, the obligation. So as you dodge Marjorie's gaze and pray your name isn't next in her ledger, just remember, In medieval matchmaking, resistance is futile. You don't choose your fate. Aunt Marjorie chooses you. No RSVP? No problem. Medieval weddings are open invites, and everyone's coming. Cousins, neighbours, priests, local pigs, and 3 random children who may or may not be related to you. There's no DJ, but Uncle Reginald has a recorder, and that's almost as bad. Planning the guest list? That's a laugh. You don't have one. If someone in your shire catches a whiff of brewing ale or hears distant arguing about dowries, they'll show up. Weddings are the medieval equivalent of a block party. Only nobody is ever quite sure whose block it is, or why there's a cow tied to the front door. You wake up the morning of your wedding to find your kitchen crawling with distant kin, some of whom you've only heard about in family legends, and at least one man who insists he's your uncle from the other side, but who everyone suspects is just here for the cheese. Children dart through the chaos, stepping on your shoes, sampling every pie, and occasionally attempting to ride the family dog. The livestock are there because, frankly, there's nowhere else for them to go. The family cow is tethered to the garden gate, the goats are eyeing the vegetable patch, and at least one chicken has snuck inside and is now pecking at the best man's boots. Don't bother shooing them away. If anything, they're considered good luck, assuming they don't eat the wedding veil first. Then come the neighbours. Medieval etiquette dictates that if you can hear the church bells, you're automatically invited, whether you know the couple or not. Entire households pack up and wander over, bringing their own mugs, a loaf of something unidentifiable, and endless opinions. The baker's wife sits herself down at the centre table and starts a lively debate about your cousin's choice in headgear, while 3 shepherds crowd the fire and reminisce about the last time someone brought actual meat to a wedding feast. There's no assigned seating. Guests jostle for benches, crates, or, if they're quick, a spot near the hearth where the heat is just enough to keep your toes thawed and just smoky enough to flavour the soup. The local priest arrives early, already thinking about the meal, and plants himself by the ale barrel. You're not sure he's ever left a wedding before dessert. Food and drink are strictly BYO. Bring your own. Your family makes a massive cauldron of pottage. The neighbours bring baskets of mystery bread, and that one weird aunt always insists on contributing a pie that nobody trusts. There's more beer than water, for safety, and it's best not to look too closely at the colour. Every available table is groaning with food of dubious origin, and someone inevitably brings a gift of pickled eggs that will haunt you for weeks. Uncle Reginald, never one to pass up an audience, has brought his recorder. He plays the same 3 songs all night, with a passionate disregard for rhythm, tune, or pleas to stop. Dancing is spontaneous, involving children, livestock, and at least one tipsy priest, and often ends with someone slipping on a suspiciously slimy turnip. The whole thing is a spectacle, a joyful, noisy, slightly chaotic mess where the idea of a private ceremony is laughable. There's no intimate wedding here, no destination event, and absolutely no bridal registry. If you're lucky, the crowd stays cheerful, the animals don't eat the flowers, and only one person tries to challenge your new spouse to a wrestling match before sundown. By the time the sun sets and the church bells ring out over the fields, your wedding is a memory made of laughter, spilled ale, muddy footprints, and an endless sea of faces, some familiar, some strange, all determined to celebrate, criticize, and possibly steal a loaf of bread on their way home. In medieval marriage, your private moment is shared by the world. Privacy is for lords, saints, and barn cats. For everyone else, welcome to the happiest day of your life, starring the entire village and every animal you've ever met. Forget white silk. Your wedding outfit is whatever's clean, not currently being worn by your sister, and only slightly infested with fleas. You squeeze into a lumpy tunic and a suspiciously damp veil. The goal is to look presentable and not faint from the heat. Bonus points if your shoes actually match. Let's talk fashion, medieval style. You'd love to imagine slipping into a flowing gown of pristine white, shimmering in candlelight, the envy of every woman from here to the next village. Instead, Your gown is the family's best tunic, worn by at least 4 previous brides and carefully patched by 3 generations of grandmothers. It's a little short in the arms, a little tight in the shoulders, and smells faintly of onions, smoke, and if you're honest, history. You wrestle it over your head, arms flailing, praying you don't hear that unmistakable ripping sound. The fabric is scratchy, probably wool, and definitely not the soft kind. It's designed more for surviving a chilly night in a barn than for making you feel beautiful. But you're not alone. Your new spouse is also sweating into a borrowed shirt, freshly cleaned by hanging it near the hearth until the smell mostly faded. If you're lucky, the weather is mild. If not, you'll spend your wedding day shivering, sweating, or both, often at the same time. There are no seamstresses on call. Your mother pins, tucks, and hopes for the best. If you have a veil, it's not new. It's a relic, possibly a curtain in a past life, and definitely more decorative than practical. If you're from a wealthier family, maybe it's edged in lace or decorated with a mysterious borrowed brooch, rumoured to bring good luck or lice. Hard to say. Accessories? Yes. If you count a wilted flower and a string of mismatched beads borrowed from a cousin, shoes are the real drama. You're aiming for a matching pair, but that's optimistic. Most likely you'll have one slightly too small leather shoe and one wooden clog, both borrowed and neither designed for dancing. If you're a groom, maybe you have a belt with a rusty buckle, gifted by an uncle who hasn't realized the family's been regifting it for a decade. Everyone gets involved in dressing you. Your sisters argue over whose turn it is to tie the sash. Your grandmother claims you're wearing it wrong, and the neighbour's wife pops in to offer unsolicited advice about your hair, which is either too plain or a disgrace to the family. You want to look radiant, but honestly, you just want to survive without collapsing or attracting every flea in a 3-mile radius. And just when you think you're ready, there's the grand reveal. You step out, blinking in the daylight, greeted by a chorus of relatives, all with opinions. The children giggle, the aunts clutch their hands to their chests, and someone inevitably sighs. Well, it's better than last time. Your spouse is already waiting, looking equally uncomfortable, adjusting their tunic for the 20th time, and giving you the universal medieval look of at least we're in this together. The rest of the village? They'll gossip about your outfit for months, maybe years. Did you see her sleeves? Why was the veil so short? I heard that tunic was once worn by Lady Agnes, before the incident with the sheep. It's all part of the experience. You might not have Instagram, but word-of-mouth fashion criticism travels faster than a rumour about a new cow in town. Still, when the music starts and you walk or hobble toward your future, none of it really matters. Yes, your dress is itchy, your shoes are borrowed, and your veil may have lived several lives, but you're the star for one scratchy, glorious, unforgettable day. And with luck, you'll return the dress with only minor stains and a new legend for Aunt Marjorie's ledger. It's your big day, and by big I mean chaotic, loud, and suspiciously sticky. The church is cold, your relatives are louder than a plague bell, and you're trying not to trip over your future spouse's cousin's pet goose. If your teeth chatter, it's either excitement or medieval hypothermia. Let's paint the scene. Dawn breaks over the village, and you're up before the rooster, heart pounding, stomach fluttering somewhere between giddy anticipation and the early warning signs of dysentery. Someone shoves a mug of weak ale into your hands and insists it'll calm your nerves. It doesn't. You spill half of it on your only clean tunic while your mother fusses over your hair, muttering about omens and the weather. Outside, the air is crisp, possibly historically chilly, and your feet are already numb. Socks are a fantasy. All you've got is hope and a pair of shoes that fit someone with much, much smaller toes. As you step outside, the sound hits you like a medieval wall. There's shouting, laughter, and the unmistakable honking of at least 2 geese. Your family is herding you toward the church, past neighbours who are already staking out the best seats, the ones furthest from the draft and closest to the snacks. You pass your great-uncle, 3 cousins in matching cloaks, and a woman who's either a long-lost aunt or just very invested in the ceremony's outcome. Inside the church, it's colder than the outside air. The ancient stones seem designed to sap warmth and optimism in equal measure. Guests jostle on wooden benches, wrapped in cloaks, shawls, and whatever else they could borrow from the parish lost and found. Your spouse-to-be stands at the altar, shifting nervously from foot to foot, giving you that look that says, "If you run, I run too." The priest, who doubles as the town's most experienced napper, tries to look solemn, but you can tell he's just eager for the post-ceremony feast. The ceremony is both blur and ordeal. Someone's baby starts wailing, the geese escape their handler and make a beeline for the altar, and your cousin drops a handful of rushes, sending at least 3 aunts into a cleaning frenzy mid-vows. You try to focus on the priest's words, but your mind wanders. Will the fire be lit when you get home? Did you remember to hide your lucky socks from your nosy little brother? Why does your spouse's mother look like she's planning something? And then there's the cold. Medieval churches are notoriously unheated, so your breath fogs in front of you as you mumble your vows. Your hands are shaking, romantic, but mostly a desperate attempt to keep circulation going. Every now and then, the wind howls through a crack in the wall, sending a shiver down the spines of everyone except, somehow, Aunt Marjorie, who seems immune to both shame and frostbite. You're not just fighting nerves, you're fighting basic biology. The floor is so cold it might as well be made of ice, and every time you shift your weight, it's a gamble. Do you want to lose feeling in your toes or your heels next? The draft creeps under the door, wraps around your ankles, and politely reminds you that you live in an era before insulation. Your only comfort is the knowledge that everyone else is suffering right along with you, and the louder you all shiver, the quicker the priest tries to speed things up. Finally, the moment comes. Rings, or whatever stand in for rings, are exchanged, vows are mumbled, and the church erupts in cheers, applause, and a few enthusiastic goose noises. You made it. You're married. Your feet may never thaw out, but at least you survived the ceremony without fainting, fleeing, or being trampled by livestock. As you walk back up the aisle, arm in arm with your equally frozen spouse, you realize that wedding day nerves are a medieval tradition. Whether it's excitement, fear, or just the bone-deep chill of a stone church in January, everyone feels them. Cold feet? Absolutely. Actual frostbite? Probably. But you made it, and that's what counts. Marriage vows in the Middle Ages are short, serious, and heavily supervised by clergy. The priest drones, everyone yawns, and you try not to sneeze on your intended. Don't worry about nerves. Saying no isn't really an option unless you want to explain yourself to the bishop, the law, and your mother for eternity. The church is packed, half the village pressed onto creaky benches, bundled in layers against the cold, all waiting for that magical moment when 2 people officially become someone else's problem. The scent in the air is a unique blend of candle wax, damp wool, and something faintly livestock adjacent, as Old Bess, the family cow, was apparently deemed too valuable to leave at home. There's a low hum of chattering relatives, punctuated by the occasional shh from the front pew, though nobody, not even the priest, expects true silence. The priest, resplendent in heavy robes that have seen more weddings than he has meals this week, stands at the front, clutching a battered prayer book. He's the only person in the room with the power to declare you married, or, if you're very unlucky, not married. His job is part spiritual, part referee, and part human lie detector. If you so much as hesitate when it's time to say your vows, the whole church leans in, hungry for drama and possibly a minor scandal. You stand before the altar, your future spouse at your side, both of you sweating partly from nerves, mostly from too many layers of formal wool. You're not holding hands, because that would be unseemly, but you're close enough to count each other's freckles. The priest begins the ceremony in Latin, which you do not understand, but nod along to anyway. It sounds impressive and, more importantly, keeps things moving. After all, nobody wants to freeze to death before the party starts. There's no music, no processional, no flower petals scattered by a child in an itchy tunic. The ritual is brisk and businesslike. The priest asks you a series of yes or no questions about your intentions, your willingness, and, most importantly, your eligibility. Have you promised yourself to anyone else? Are you related within the forbidden degrees, which basically covers everyone in the next 3 villages? Are you entering this union freely, or is someone holding a pitchfork just out of frame? You reply in the affirmative, loudly, clearly, and without any sign of doubt. This is not the time for jokes, hesitation, or last-minute requests for clarification. If you so much as stutter, Aunt Marjorie will launch into a 20-minute explanation of proper marital obedience, and the priest will start reciting the forbidden degrees by name, just to make a point. It's best to just say "I do," or the medieval equivalent, and keep the ceremony from dragging into a second service. For those who dream of romance, this part can be a letdown. No personal vows, no soulful declarations, no passionate kisses. You may exchange a ring, if your family can afford one, or perhaps a simple token, like a woven ribbon or a wooden spoon. It's less about love and more about contract. The important thing is that it's public. Witnesses matter. If anyone disputes the marriage later, and someone always does, the whole village can testify that yes, you really did look slightly terrified, but you said yes anyway. The priest blesses the union, waves some incense for good measure, and if he's feeling generous, offers a short homily about duty, faithfulness, and not arguing in front of livestock. The congregation erupts in polite applause, a few cheers, and at least one premature attempt to start the wedding feast early. And that's it. You're married. The whole process takes less time than a modern toast. You shuffle out of the church, blinking in the daylight, arm in arm with your new spouse, and trailed by the entire population of your village. You didn't faint, cry, or cause a scandal. You said "I do" or else. Congratulations. Your life together has officially begun, whether you're ready or not. Once the vows are over, it's time for everyone's favorite custom, the bedding ceremony. Picture a room full of relatives loudly tucking you in and tossing advice while you try to disappear into your straw mattress. Privacy? That's for rich people and cats. You're about to learn the true meaning of oversharing. Let's set the scene. The wedding feast is winding down. The air is thick with the scent of spilled ale, wilted turnips, and victory sweat. People are cheerfully tipsy, bellies full, and you, lucky you, are about to become the main event. The priest has said his final prayer. Aunt Marjorie has recounted every other bedding ceremony she's ever witnessed, in excruciating detail. And now, with a loud cheer, the crowd surges to its feet, ready for the night's grand finale. You're swept away, hand in hand with your new spouse, as the elders lead a procession from the firelit hall to the bridal chamber, a generous description for a corner of the house with a lumpy straw mattress, 3 blankets, and a privacy curtain that's more of a polite suggestion. If you're lucky, someone swept out the chickens. If not, well, you're sharing your big moment with a feathered audience. There's no romantic escape, no sneaking off together into the moonlight. Instead, you're surrounded by everyone you've ever met. Grandparents, neighbors, small children clutching leftover pie, and at least 2 livestock who wandered in and refused to leave. Your best friends are giggling in the corner, your mother-in-law is rearranging your pillows, and your father-in-law is lighting a ceremonial candle while reciting advice about sturdy grandchildren. The bedding ceremony is a full-on group effort. Elders and trusted witnesses physically tuck you into bed, making sure you're really, truly, undeniably there. Blankets are layered with gusto. The community midwife offers you a mug of something for your nerves, which tastes suspiciously like regret. Someone fluffs your pillow, someone else gives your spouse a slap on the back and a hearty good luck, as if you're both about to wrestle a wild boar. Advice comes from every corner. Don't forget to pray first. Keep your feet warm. If you get cold, just snuggle like we did in the winter of '47. No one lost any toes that year. Every married couple in the room is suddenly an expert, and the single ones are taking furious mental notes. The children, meanwhile, are just excited to see grown-ups acting so weird. If you're hoping for intimacy, think again. Your job is to look cheerful and not die of embarrassment, as your Aunt Gertrude describes, in loving detail, the proper way to fold a blanket. Meanwhile, your new spouse looks at you with wide, terrified eyes, both of you silently begging the other to please, just please, survive this ordeal with dignity intact. In wealthier families, things get even more public. Some noble households require witnesses to stay until, well, things are well underway. There are official reports, legal documents, and the occasional nosy scribe jotting down notes for the family archive. Nothing cements a marriage like knowing half your relatives are lurking just outside the curtain, listening for signs of consummation. For the rest of your life, someone will claim they heard you giggle or sneeze and will bring it up every feast day just to keep you humble. Finally, the well-wishers begin to file out, leaving you and your spouse alone at last, if you're lucky, that is. The door closes, the candle flickers, and you both lie there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of retreating footsteps. Only then does the reality set in. You are married, in every way that counts, and you have survived the first of many marital indignities. In the morning you'll wake to teasing, more advice, and possibly the odd neighbour who claims they just needed to check the curtains. But for now, you rest. Awkward, exhausted, and, if nothing else, relieved that the public part is finally over. And that, dear listener, is medieval privacy, a concept best understood as other people's business. Now, the fun part, food. The medieval wedding feast is less Michelin star and more potluck with mystery meat. Everyone brings something, but mostly it's just turnips, slightly suspicious pies, and beer that tastes like it's seen better centuries. You'll eat, you'll drink, you'll regret both. Picture it. The wedding crowd has shuffled from church to the Great Hall, or, more realistically, the largest barn in the village that isn't currently housing livestock. The tables are set with the finest wooden boards available. There's a faint hope that someone, somewhere, brought a tablecloth. But after 3 generations and 12 previous weddings, it's more whole than fabric. No one seems to mind. The real decoration is the sheer abundance of food, or what passes for it. Let's start with the main attraction. Pottage. This is the Middle Ages answer to what's for dinner, and the answer is always pottage. It's a bubbling cauldron of stew, containing whatever's been foraged, scraped, or scrounged that week. Root vegetables, lentils, barley, the odd bone, and if you're lucky, an actual chunk of meat. The recipe? There isn't one. Every wedding guest with a ladle just dumps their own contribution into the communal pot. The result is a thick, brownish sludge with the mysterious ability to fill your stomach and haunt your dreams. You eat it because it's there, not because you actually want to know what's in it. And then there are the pies. The good pies are gone in minutes, snatched up by the quick and the lucky. What remains are the experimental ones, the culinary equivalent of a dare. Aunt Maud's fish pie has a crust so dense you could use it as a weapon in a siege. Someone tries to pass off a pigeon pie as chicken. There's always one brave soul who slices in, sniffs, shrugs, and declares, "Not the worst I've had," which in medieval terms is practically a rave review. The bread deserves special mention. Hard, dark, and alarmingly chewy, it's cut into thick slabs and meant to soak up the pottage. Occasionally, someone brings a trencher, a stale, flat hunk of bread that doubles as a plate, and later as food for the local pigs. If your teeth survive the meal, consider it a wedding gift from fate. Drinks? There's ale, lots of ale. Medieval beer isn't the hoppy craft delight you're picturing, but more of a murky, flat brew designed for hydration and calories, not for taste. Children drink it too, because it's safer than water, which is a bold statement about your era. The bravest among you might sample the mead, a sticky sweet concoction made from honey and optimism, usually reserved for the high table or anyone with a powerful thirst and low standards. Let's not forget the side dishes. Bowls of boiled beans, plates of cabbage with more black pepper than actual cabbage, and a suspiciously grey cheese that someone swears was a wedding present from the last feast, but no one remembers who gave it. For dessert, if you're very lucky, there are honey cakes, usually snapped up by the children and a fast-moving aunt who is never seen eating but always looks suspiciously content. The eating goes on for hours. The feasting technically goes on for days. In theory, it's a 3-day celebration, but by hour 6, most guests are sprawled by the fire, groaning, clutching their stomachs, and already plotting their excuses to leave before the dancing starts again. As night falls, the musicians, Red, anyone with a drum or a sturdy pair of boots, pick up the tempo, and Uncle Reginald, fueled by pottage and questionable ale, attempts to start a conga line. You'll eat, you'll drink, you'll laugh, you'll definitely regret having a second helping of the grey pie. But in the end, the feast is less about the food and more about surviving together, one suspicious spoonful at a time. Welcome to medieval matrimony. May your stomach be strong and your regrets few. The wedding gifts have arrived. Spoiler, it's not a blender. Expect baskets of onions, a new spoon, and possibly a live chicken tied to a chair. If you're really lucky, you'll get a bag of salt, medieval gold. If not, just smile and pretend to love your brand new second-hand candle. Let's be clear, there's no registry, no wish list. No one is checking for duplicates or scanning barcodes with their phone. In medieval times, the only registry is the one in Aunt Marjorie's head, and she's mostly using it to keep track of who owes whom for last year's funeral pie. The gifts come in waves, some practical, some baffling, all deeply heartfelt, whether you want them or not. First up, onions. You don't know true joy until you've unwrapped a lumpy cloth to find 3 pounds of slightly squishy onions, lovingly harvested from Cousin Edmund's prize-winning garden. These are the status symbol of the peasant class, versatile, long-lasting, in theory, and a great way to ensure your marital home will always smell a little bit like regret. If onions aren't enough, you might also receive turnips, rutabagas, or, for the very lucky, a lumpy sack of barley. No one ever gives you apples. Those are reserved for people who married above their station. Next come the utensils. Someone always brings a spoon. Spoons are a big deal. Losing one can throw off an entire household's meal plan. A new spoon, freshly carved from last year's storm-felled tree, is an act of genuine love. A slightly used spoon, clearly gnawed by at least 2 previous owners, is also an act of love, just less exclusive. Other common gifts: chipped pottery, a candle stub, or a wooden bowl that's as good as new except for the scorch mark and that odd whistling sound it makes when the wind blows. Now, the livestock parade begins. A live chicken, sometimes 2 if you're popular, is tied to a chair, or, in more dramatic cases, let loose to roam the festivities, pecking at whatever it finds interesting: your shoes, the cake, the priest's cloak. You thank the gift giver, catch the chicken, and try to look like someone who's always dreamed of waking up to the sound of poultry on their pillow. Goats are less common but unforgettable. One legendary couple received a goat that immediately ate the hem of the bride's dress and then fell asleep in the rushes. A symbol of fertility, prosperity, and, let's be honest, endless inconvenience. Salt is the crown jewel of wedding gifts. Forget fine china. A bag of salt is a small fortune, a ticket to better flavour, and a fighting chance at surviving the next winter. If you're gifted salt, you know the giver truly cares, or is trying to buy your family's silence about last year's hayrick incident. Either way, you clutch that precious pouch like it's medieval cryptocurrency. Not all gifts are created equal, of course. For every thoughtful, well-cured ham or neatly woven blanket, there's a present that's clearly been regifted more times than anyone can count. The candle with someone else's initials carved into it, the pair of mittens that only fit if you have 3 fingers, the mystery jug of herbal tonic brewed by Great Aunt Sybil, who once mistook lye for honey. You smile. You nod. You mutter grateful noises and hope no one expects you to actually drink it. After the feast, your new marital home is stuffed with practical treasures and future headaches. The kitchen table groans under the weight of root vegetables and so many onions. The bed is slightly lumpy with newly gifted straw, and the chicken has already made herself comfortable by the fire. The neighbours come by to offer congratulations, advice, and sometimes a subtle hint that the salt should be shared come next harvest. There's no blender, no electric kettle, no matching towel set. But there's warmth, effort, and just a touch of competitive gifting. And in a world where every bite, every stitch, and every candle counts, maybe that's enough. If not, you can always regift the onions next year. No one ever remembers who gave them anyway. Congratulations, you're moving in. Your marital home is a one-room wonder with no windows, an open fire, and a permanent smell of wet hay. If you're extra blessed, your in-laws live next door and have opinions on everything, so romantic. Let's take the grand tour. You open the creaky door, there's only one, and step onto a floor that's half packed earth, half something squishier. No need to worry about tracking mud inside. It's already there, mixed with generations of spilled ale and whatever the last chicken left behind. The one rug is really just an area where the rushes haven't completely disintegrated yet. You get used to the crunch underfoot, or at least, you tell yourself you do. Walls? Think more advisory guidelines than solid barrier. Woven wattle and daub, patched with memories and a little bit of desperation, bow inward in the wind. There's a gap here and there, just big enough to let in a family of determined mice and a year-round draft that could chill soup. Windows are a future dream. For now, you've got an oiled cloth tacked over a hole in the wall, fluttering like a medieval curtain and doing nothing to stop the weather. The centerpiece of your love nest is the open hearth, smoking merrily and coating everything, dishes, hair, lungs, with a fine film of soot. In the corner, a battered iron pot bubbles with the next meal. Pottage, forever pottage, infused with flavors from the last 7 dinners and a mystery ingredient nobody dares identify. The chimney, if you're lucky enough to have one, is just a hole in the roof. Most days, it drafts out the smoke. Some days, it drafts out the cat, too. Furnishings are minimal and multi-purpose. There's a rickety table with one leg shorter than the others, easily fixed with a wedge of bread you weren't going to eat anyway. A couple of wooden stools and a lumpy straw mattress tucked in the darkest corner, possibly home to more wildlife than your garden. If you're wealthy, there's a chest for linens. If you're not, there's a pile of folded rags and a fervent hope nobody looks too closely. Your new home isn't just for you and your spouse. There's always room for family, and by family I mean everyone. Siblings, cousins, the elderly aunt who snores louder than the pigs, and naturally the in-laws. Your mother-in-law pops by 3 times a day with hot tips on hearth management, marital bliss, and why you should really be sweeping more aggressively. Her advice is free, constant, and only slightly passive-aggressive. Privacy? That's just a theory, like unicorns or a warm medieval bath. You sleep, eat, and argue in the same 10 feet of space, with every whisper bouncing off the walls and right into your neighbour's ears. The livestock, when not safely outside, have a knack for finding the warmest spot, usually your bed, leaving you the draftiest end of the room. On a good night, you'll fall asleep to the gentle lullaby of rain leaking through the thatch, and your spouse swatting at mosquitoes the size of sparrows. But it's not all misery. Your home is, in its own muddy, chaotic way, the heart of your new life. The fire glows. The bread sometimes rises. You share laughter, chores, and an unspoken agreement, not to mention the smell. Neighbours wander by for gossip and a ladle of stew. Children tumble in, trailing mud and questionable pets. Even the draft is something you get used to, eventually, at least until winter, when you learn that frostbite is just another medieval rite of passage. As for the in-laws, well, If you can survive their daily visits, unsolicited opinions, and occasional borrowed goat, you can survive anything. So, you snuggle closer on your straw mattress, watch the smoke spiral up through the rafters, and realize that, window or not, this is home. Because nothing says welcome to married life like waking up with your spouse on one side, your mother-in-law on the other, and a chicken at your feet. Forget who does the dishes. Your marital chores include mending, milking, mucking, and making sure the chickens don't sleep in the bed. The only thing you share more than chores is mutual exhaustion. Teamwork makes the misery go round. Welcome to your new, not-so-glamorous daily routine. As the sun peeks through the gap in the thatch, you and your spouse are already up. Because in medieval marriage, sleeping in means you wake up to find the cow has eaten your breakfast and the neighbour's child has borrowed your only bucket. There are no alarms, just the urgent squawking of chickens and the distant yelp of a goat that has, once again, gotten its head stuck in the fence. The to-do list starts before breakfast, and ends never, really. You begin by stoking the hearth and coaxing a reluctant fire from yesterday's ashes. If it smokes out the fleas instead of your lungs, that's a win. Next, it's time to sweep the floor, which is less about cleaning and more about relocating dirt from one corner to another and discovering what treasures, dead beetles, last year's hazelnut, the neighbour's missing sock, have surfaced overnight. Breakfast is less meal and more refueling for the chores ahead. Once you've survived pottage and bread with a suspicious crunch, it's time to divide and conquer. Or, more realistically, to divide and commiserate. If you're the more domestically inclined spouse, read The One Who Lost at Rock, Paper, Scissors this morning. You get to patch tunics, churn butter, spin wool, and hope your stitches hold better than your patience. Medieval clothing is mostly repair with a touch of creative disguise. That hole in your sleeve? Just call it ventilation. Meanwhile, someone heads outside to milk the cow, assuming she's in the mood and hasn't hidden in the hedgerow out of spite. Cows, sheep, and goats all need attention, and not just because they're cute. In the Middle Ages, livestock are more valuable than children, and often better behaved. You learn to coax, bribe, and occasionally threaten with an extra bale of hay just to get enough milk for the day's porridge. Once the animals are sorted, the real fun begins. Mucking out the byre. This is a test of love, endurance, and how well you can ignore the smell of centuries-old manure. Working together, you shovel, scrape, and pray no one slips on anything too hazardous. If you make it to midday without an accident, congratulations, you're officially a team. Lunch is a quick affair. Another bowl of pottage, maybe a suspicious turnip, and a bite of cheese if you're lucky. Then it's back to the fields, gardens, or wherever the next crisis has flared up. Weeding, planting, and chasing away crows are joint activities, as is arguing about whose turn it is to deal with the compost pile that has started to develop its own weather system. Afternoons bring more household chores. Water must be fetched. A walk of approximately 43 miles, uphill both ways in the rain. And firewood gathered before someone else nabs the best branches. The chickens, who treat the house as their personal inn, must be herded outside at least a dozen times. You and your spouse quickly develop a system of hand signals, glares, and tired grins, because nothing says romance like catching a goose together or rescuing a cat from the rafters. Evening comes, and with it, more mending, sweeping, and preparing tomorrow's pottage. As you collapse by the fire, the sense of teamwork is real even if you're too tired to say it out loud. You share exhaustion, a faint aroma of livestock, and a bed that somehow always has crumbs in it. In medieval marriage, love isn't measured in roses or poetry, but in how many chores you can survive together before nightfall. Teamwork doesn't just make the misery go round, it makes sure there's bread on the table and only a reasonable number of chickens in the bed. No awkward school assemblies here. Your only education comes from whispered warnings and vague threats from the local clergy. Forget diagrams, you get stern glances, talk of sin, and a sudden fear of going blind. Good luck. Let's begin with the basics. In the Middle Ages, if you had questions about married life, especially the bedroom bits, you were out of luck. There's no helpful pamphlet, no birds and the bees talk from dad, and absolutely no chance your mother will do anything but blush, mumble, and shove you at the nearest priest. Your official education on intimacy is about as clear as a muddy pond and about as inviting. The priest is your main source of information, which is less educational and more terrifying. He summons you and your spouse-to-be, fixes you both with a gaze that suggests he's already disappointed, and launches into a stern lecture about marital duty. Be fruitful and multiply, he intones, sounding less like an enthusiastic teacher and more like someone warning you not to anger the livestock. Every sentence is weighed down with talk of morality, sin, and why you should absolutely, under no circumstances, enjoy yourself too much. Actual details, those are skipped. Instead, you're treated to a litany of don'ts. Don't let your mind wander. Don't stray from your spouse. Don't make loud noises after curfew. Don't think impure thoughts, especially during Lent, Advent, or, if you're unlucky, every other Tuesday. According to the priest, even smiling too much in bed could land you in hot water with the saints. By the end, you're left with more questions than answers, and a creeping sense that marital relations are equal parts sacred, mysterious, and probably a little bit dangerous. Your fellow villagers, meanwhile, have advice of their own, mostly delivered in whispers behind haystacks or over cups of weak ale. The older women will give you cryptic hints, just do what your mother did, and always remember to close the door, while the older men simply wink and say, you'll figure it out. If you're lucky, a kind aunt or friend will slip you a tip or two. If you get confused, just remember it's like churning butter, but with more prayers. Not exactly helpful. As for practical guidance, you're on your own. The concept of consent, comfort, or even basic communication is not exactly covered in the priest's lesson plan. Everything is supposed to be natural, as long as you don't break any mysterious church rules. There are plenty of those. Certain days are forbidden, certain positions frowned upon. And if anyone in the village so much as suspects you're having too much fun, expect a sermon at Sunday Mass pointed directly at your pew. In some regions, the church even posts a list of forbidden times, saints' days, fast days, festival weeks, or days ending in Y, if the priest is especially zealous. You and your spouse find yourselves comparing calendars, desperately seeking a night that isn't a holy day, only to be interrupted by the rooster, the church bell, or your mother-in-law demanding to know what all the fuss is about. The result? Most medieval couples approach the marriage bed with a blend of confusion, anxiety, and a sense of, let's just get this over with and hope for the best. If things go well, no one speaks of it. If things go awkwardly, you can be sure the neighbour's dog will wander in at exactly the wrong moment. Over time, you and your spouse develop your own system, based mostly on trial, error, and a mutual agreement to ignore the priest's warnings about spontaneous blindness. If children arrive, everyone nods approvingly and congratulates the priest for his effective, if confusing, lesson. So, in medieval marriage, sex ed is less about knowledge and more about surviving embarrassment, guilt, and the ever-watchful eye of the church. Good luck indeed. The honeymoon suite is rustic. Your bed is made of straw, your blanket weighs 50 pounds, and at least 2 animals are probably sleeping under it. You and your spouse are now officially united in scratching, sneezing, and dodging the family goat. Let's set the scene. It's your first night as a married couple, and romance is in the air, right alongside the scent of hay, damp wool, and something that might be cheese. You step into your new living quarters, newlyweds, ready to embark on a life of love, comfort, and mutual hardship. The room is aglow with candlelight, which is less atmosphere and more necessary, because there's a hole in the roof and you need to spot the leaks. You approach your marital bed, which is technically a mattress, but more honestly just a large bag of straw on wooden slats. If you're lucky, the straw is relatively fresh, changed within the last season. If not, well, it's developed its own little ecosystem. Fleas, bedbugs, and the occasional spider all call this straw home, and now, so do you. You and your spouse climb in, pulling the massive blanket over your heads. It's thick and heavy, stitched together from every spare scrap of wool your families could find. It hasn't been washed since the last family wedding, and, from the smell, might contain the ghosts of marital arguments past. You try not to think about what's crunching under your toes and instead focus on the symphony of sounds, your spouse's nervous breathing, the wind howling through the thatch, and the gentle snoring of the family dog at your feet. Privacy is, of course, a foreign concept. The honeymoon suite is the same one-room home you'll share with your new in-laws, at least 3 children who refuse to sleep anywhere else, and a rotating cast of livestock. The family goat, who's never met a boundary it respects, snuffles under the bed in search of something edible, while the cat curls up on your pillow and proceeds to ignore you both entirely. Sleep is a team sport. You huddle together, shivering against the night air. If one of you rolls over, the whole mattress squeaks, shifting straw and sending a cascade of itchy flakes up your sleeve. If you're lucky, you'll fall asleep quickly, drifting off to dreams of warm bread and quieter rooms. If you're not, you'll spend the night counting ceiling beams, scratching bites, and praying nobody decides to stoke the fire in the middle of the night, because there's nothing quite like being blinded by embers at 2 a.m. Still, there are bright spots in the darkness. In between the sneezing and scratching, there's the comfort of not being alone. You share whispered jokes, quiet laughter, and the strange intimacy of getting through the discomfort together. Maybe your spouse offers you the slightly less lumpy side, or you both team up to relocate the chicken who's decided your pillow is prime real estate. It's not glamorous, but it's real. 2 people starting a life in the face of fleas, cold drafts, and the neighbour's rooster practicing for his morning solo. As dawn creeps in and the first noises of the day begin, cows lowing, children squabbling, mother-in-law bustling by, you realise this is what counts for bliss in the Middle Ages. It's not silk sheets or room service. It's surviving together, wrapped in a blanket that's more history than hygiene, celebrating another morning where you didn't roll out of bed onto a goose. In medieval marriage, love is measured in shared chores, inside jokes, and the mutual decision to change the straw more than once a year. Forget fancy honeymoons. This is marital bliss, imperfect, uncomfortable, and undeniably yours. Fighting in medieval marriage is inevitable. Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's about who left mud on the rushes. Either way, it usually ends in a huff, a muttered prayer, and someone throwing a vegetable. Let's be honest. The only thing more common than fleas in your straw mattress is a disagreement with your spouse. When you live in a single room with 12 other people, 6 chickens, and a goat who thinks she's part of the family, personal space is a distant dream. Tempers are short, especially after a long day of fieldwork, hauling water, and realizing the best part of dinner is the weak ale. The arguments start small. Someone forgets to latch the door, and now the neighbour's pigs are in the kitchen again. Or perhaps you didn't spread enough rushes on the floor, and the in-laws are muttering about standards slipping. You step on a chicken in the dark, stub your toe, and before you know it, you're blaming your spouse for always leaving the hen in the wrong place. Voices rise, arms wave, and someone grabs the nearest throwable object, a turnip, a chunk of stale bread, or, on especially bad days, the family sock. Money, or the lack of it, is a favourite topic. You want to buy a new pot for the hearth. Your spouse insists you need a new roof. We can eat cold stew, but we can't eat rain, is a common refrain. You both know the truth, you can't afford either. So you argue about it just to pass the time. The in-laws weigh in, the children take sides, and the goat chooses this moment to chew on your dowry blanket. It's democracy in action, medieval edition. Sometimes the fights are about chores. Who forgot to milk the cow? Who let the fire go out? Why is there a mysterious puddle in the corner of the house? Accusations fly like arrows at Agincourt. You point to your spouse points to the cat, who remains, as always, above reproach. There's a special category of argument reserved for feast days. Stress is high, the house is full, and everyone is trying to pretend they aren't judging each other's pottage. Maybe your spouse invited their cousin, the one who always borrows things that never return, or perhaps someone made a snide comment about your latest batch of ale. Tensions simmer all day and inevitably boil over when someone drops the good spoon into the fire or forgets to bless the bread. Cue the drama, sighs, icy glares, and yes, a well-aimed turnip. Apologies when they come are just as dramatic. Sometimes it's a muttered sorry while you're both kneeling in church, praying that God didn't hear all the things you said about each other's mothers. Other times, it's the peace offering of an extra portion of stew or a careful patch in the tunic you ripped during last night's tantrum. Words don't always come easy, so you let actions speak. Maybe you fix your spouse's leaky shoe, or let them have the last hunk of bread. In a world where everyone is always watching and reporting back to Aunt Marjorie, keeping the peace is an ongoing art form. And then there's the vegetable throwing, a medieval tradition as old as turnips themselves. Nothing diffuses a fight like a sudden flying root vegetable. You both end up laughing, cleaning up the mess together, and swearing you'll save the next argument for after Lent. Eventually, you remember that you're in this together, against the mud, the in-laws, and the poultry invasion. By bedtime, the day's quarrels dissolve into mutual exhaustion. You collapse, side by side on the straw mattress, still itchy, still grumpy, but somehow still a team. In medieval marriage, arguments are frequent, apologies are creative, and love is measured in how often you're willing to forgive and dodge the occasional airborne vegetable. Love isn't whispered poetry. It's your spouse not stealing your bread, or maybe letting you use the good bowl. If you're lucky, they'll bring you a slightly less wilted flower or remember your name during Lent. Swoon. Medieval romance is a world away from the troubadours and love songs your mind might conjure up. Forget moonlit serenades beneath the castle window. For most married couples, courtship is less Romeo and Juliet and more please pass the turnips and don't mention the lice. Your declarations of devotion happen between hauling water and scolding the family goat, not on bended knee, but while kneading dough with sticky, work-worn hands. Your spouse's idea of a compliment. You look less tired than yesterday, or the much coveted, that tunic really hides the mud stains. If your partner spares you from a particularly brutal round of weeding or volunteers to fetch water on a sleeting February morning, that's romance. Flowers are a rare treat, and usually come from the same patch the livestock graze in. You can tell it's true love when someone hands you a wild daisy, only slightly nibbled by a sheep. In the absence of chocolate, jewelry, or scented love letters, medieval couples find their own ways to show affection. Maybe your spouse leaves you the last bite of bread, or doesn't point out that you've been wearing the same socks for a suspiciously long time. Maybe they patch your tunic with their own hands, muttering about your inability to avoid brambles, but still fixing every tear. Even a shared joke about the neighbour's disastrous ale counts as flirtation, laughter being one of the few luxuries everyone can afford. For the true romantics, there's always the chance to sneak a moment alone. You might share a conspiratorial grin while the in-laws are bickering or steal a kiss behind the barn, assuming you aren't caught by Aunt Marjorie, who will immediately recite 3 reasons why that's improper before sunrise. But most displays of affection are public, communal, and so understated that only the two of you really notice. A warm look across the table, a gentle nudge in a crowded room, or simply choosing to sit next to each other on the single bench. Subtlety is key when you live in a one-room house with half the village watching. Romantic gifts, when they appear, are always practical. Maybe it's a wooden comb, carefully carved during a rare spare moment, or a new woolen scarf to keep the cold at bay. If your spouse presents you with a pie, not burnt and with almost no mouse holes, that's a grand gesture. Some couples mark anniversaries by swapping extra chores or giving each other the good spot on the mattress for a night. Diamonds? No, but maybe a particularly shiny stone found in the field and polished on a tunic sleeve. Language of love in medieval times is refreshingly blunt. I'll help you with the milking is code for you're my favorite, and I saved you the last onion means more than 1,000 love sonnets. Even an argument can be oddly affectionate. If your spouse is arguing with you, it means they care enough to notice you left your boots in the firewood again. And, of course, the ultimate romantic gesture: keeping each other's secrets. You and your spouse both know who accidentally left the gate open, who dropped the bread in the mud, and who actually started the great sheep stampede of last spring. But you smile, say nothing, and let your in-laws blame the weather. In medieval marriage, love is quieter, earthier, and stubbornly practical. There's little time for poetry, but there's plenty of loyalty, laughter, and small acts of kindness. Each a reminder that romance isn't about grand declarations, but about sticking together, day after muddy, turnip-flavored day. So when your spouse lets you have the last clean bowl, just know, in the Middle Ages, that's true love. You thought marriage was between two people. Wrong. It's between two entire families, 3 nosy neighbours, and at least 1 blackmailing friar. Every decision is debated at dinner, and you're not sure if Cousin Bertram is plotting murder or just bad at conversation. In the Middle Ages, privacy isn't a thing, and independence is mostly for saints and hermits. The moment you tie the knot, your life becomes a diplomatic mission, except instead of foreign powers, you're negotiating with the extended family and anyone in a 5-mile radius who claims just to be concerned. Your spouse's kin descend on your household like migrating geese, bringing casseroles, unsolicited advice, and the kind of probing questions that make you long for a second plague. Family politics begin at breakfast and don't end until the last candle sputters out. Your in-laws have opinions about everything: how you sweep the floor, what you feed the chickens, and whether your method of churning butter is traditional enough. Your father-in-law has firm ideas about crop rotation. Your mother-in-law keeps a running tally of your failings, she calls them suggestions, and relays them to you between courses. Even your youngest brother-in-law chimes in about how grandmother did it better, as if he even remembers last harvest. But it's not just the direct family. The cousins, uncles, and mysterious aunts, some of whom you're convinced appeared out of thin air, each expect a say in daily affairs. Decisions that should be simple, like when to repair the fence or whether to eat the last onion, become council meetings. Someone calls for a vote. Someone else brings out the family ledger, where, suspiciously, your side is always in the minority. And the argument only ends when the bread runs out. Then there are the neighbours, whose main occupation is watching and reporting. If you so much as raise your voice or let the goat into the vegetable patch, everyone will know by sundown. Local gossip is a well-oiled machine. Your disagreements, your dinner menu, and even how loudly you snore are all public record. If you think you're keeping secrets, you're just not listening hard enough. And let's not forget the clergy. Every village has at least one priest or friar who takes an interest in the moral state of local families, which translates to a lot of eavesdropping and the occasional strongly worded sermon. If you skip Mass, argue in public, or, heaven forbid, miss a donation, expect to find yourself the star of next Sunday's lecture on family unity and obedience to one's elders. The truly enterprising friar might extract a loaf of bread or a secret in exchange for forgetting your latest marital squabble. Family gatherings are where politics reach their peak. Feasts, holy days, or even simple meals become opportunities for subtle power plays. Cousin Bertram arrives, glowering and muttering, possibly plotting your downfall or possibly just wondering who ate the last of the pie. The aunt with the best memory for grudges sits by the fire, quietly reminding everyone about that time you burned the porridge and almost poisoned the whole family. The uncle who knows a guy is suddenly an expert on every crisis. Even the children pick sides, forming tiny alliances and plotting raids on the dessert table. Some days, you dream of eloping. Just you, your spouse, and maybe a goat for company. But in the Middle Ages, marriage is as much about networks as it is about affection. Your family's fortunes and feuds intertwine with your spouse's, and sometimes even with families you didn't know existed. The upside? When trouble comes, a lost sheep, a sick child, or a bandit lurking in the woods, you have an army of relatives, neighbors, and even the odd friar ready to rally to your side. As long as you keep the bread coming and the politics reasonably civil, you'll survive. So, you learn the art of the polite nod, the strategic retreat, and the well-timed "let's ask the priest." Because medieval marriage isn't just a partnership. It's a team sport, with more referees than players. If you thought the wedding was chaotic, just wait until childbirth. No epidurals, no privacy, just a crowd of helpful women, a bucket of cold water, and a midwife who's seen it all and will tell everyone. Congratulations. You're about to be initiated into one of the most daunting and public adventures of medieval life. Motherhood. You get no say in timing. When the baby's ready, so is the entire village. The moment you show the faintest sign of labor, a network of aunts, neighbors, and distant cousins materialize out of thin air, bustling around your tiny home with the energy of people who love to be helpful, especially when it involves someone else's crisis. Your birthing chamber, which is just your usual living space, but with slightly cleaner rushes and less livestock underfoot, quickly fills up. There's no such thing as just the parents. Medieval birthing is a team sport, and the bench is deep. The midwife, a local legend with hands like shovels and stories to match, takes command. She's seen everything from twins to turnips, and she's not shy about sharing her wisdom or her favorite terrifying anecdotes at the worst possible moments. The other women, mothers, sisters, neighbors, and at least one woman who claims she's related, form a chorus of encouragement, advice, and side commentary. They argue about the right way to tie a swaddling cloth, the exact temperature of the water, boiling, always boiling, and whether the best luck comes from prayers to St. Margaret or St. Anne. Privacy? Absolutely not. If you're lucky, the only men who show up are bringing wood for the fire or fleeing in terror. Forget pain relief. No anesthetic, no gentle music, just whatever herbal concoction the midwife can whip up and the reassuring thought that people have been doing this for centuries. You grit your teeth, grab the nearest hand, hopefully human, and let the advice wash over you. Someone will insist you drink something restorative. Someone else will start recounting the details of her last 5 labors. At least 2 aunts will critique your breathing technique, as if you're competing in the Olympics and not just trying to stay alive. Meanwhile, outside the house, the menfolk and children loiter anxiously, shooing away livestock and whispering prayers to whichever saint specializes in uncomplicated deliveries. The family dog is banished to the corner, looking just as bewildered as your spouse, who, if present at all, is probably holding a bucket and pretending to be useful. When the baby finally arrives, red-faced, squalling, and covered in proof that medieval laundry is a nightmare, the room erupts in celebration. The midwife announces the birth like a town crier, and every woman in the room immediately claims a share of credit. The new mother gets a sip of broth, a pat on the hand, and the comforting thought that she's now officially a grown-up. The child is cleaned, mostly, wrapped in swaddling, and handed to you with a flurry of opinions on who the nose most resembles. The rest of the village is already waiting outside for news. Within minutes, the baby's arrival is public record. Your heroics are part of local legend, and your name is added to the list of those who survived a real medieval labor. The midwife, never one to miss an opportunity, starts listing your next steps. More boiling water, prayers for strength, and a quick blessing for a peaceful night. Spoiler, there will be no peace. As the house slowly empties, you and your spouse exchange weary, grateful looks. The room smells of herbs, sweat, and triumph. You're exhausted, overwhelmed, and suddenly in possession of a future turnip puller. And despite the chaos, you're part of a centuries-old tradition, one that, for all its discomfort, guarantees you a place in the village, a story to tell, and a baby who, with luck, will sleep through at least one night in the next 3 years. Welcome to medieval motherhood. As joyful, exhausting, and public as every other part of married life. Choosing a baby name is simple. Pick a saint, avoid your least favorite relative, and make sure the name isn't already taken by a goat. If all else fails, hope the priest can spell it. Let's be honest, baby naming is a group project whether you want it to be or not. The moment the newborn's first cries echo off the wattle and daub walls, the entire family springs into action, shouting suggestions, opinions, and strong objections. Your spouse wants to honor Great Uncle Oswald. You'd rather name the baby after that one nice miller who always gives you extra flour. Aunt Marjorie, never one to let a crisis go to waste, insists on her own name, Marjorie, obviously because it's traditional and because no one else has dared in the last 2 generations. First, you consider the saints. Naming after saints is not only respectable but increases the odds that someone up there will watch over your child and maybe throw in a little extra luck. Saint Margaret, Saint John, Saint Agnes, or, if you're feeling especially ambitious, Saint Radegund, even though no one in the village has ever been able to spell it the same way twice. Bonus points if you pick a feast day close to the child's birthday, making annual celebrations a 2-for-1 deal. Then there's family tradition. Every family has a few names that get recycled more than last year's wedding gifts. If you're part of the Wilfred line, you'd better like Wilfred, because you'll hear it shouted in every direction for the next 50 years. Siblings, cousins, uncles, and that odd family pig all seem to share the same 3 names. Navigating family egos is a delicate dance. You don't want to offend Grandma by skipping her favorite name, but you're also trying to avoid being one of 5 Ediths in the house. As for the family pig, best to check she's not currently Edith or John before announcing the name at the next feast. The priest, of course, has final say. He's seen it all. Babies named after every possible saint. 2 named Jesus in a single season. Big scandal. And once, a child named Friday, just because that's when the midwife finally woke up from the ordeal. The priest likes names that are simple, pious, and unlikely to cause confusion at Mass. If he can spell it and pronounce it, you're halfway there. In some cases, the name is decided before the baby even arrives, especially if there's a patron waiting to bless the christening with a small sack of coins. Other times, the name is picked at the last minute, in a flurry of panic and negotiation, while the midwife waits, pen in hand, and the villagers outside start placing bets. It's an open secret that the local scribe once mixed up 2 baptism records, resulting in twin boys named Wilfred Maud and Maud Wilfred. Both survived, though neither ever forgave their parents. And then there are the outliers, the names chosen in a fit of rebellion or after a particularly strong batch of mead. Storm, Peregrine, or Hawk might appear once every few decades, immortalizing the night lightning struck the barn or a hawk stole the family's best hen. These children are destined for legend, or at the very least, a lifetime of explaining their name at every village gathering. No matter what you choose, someone is bound to complain. The name is too common, too odd, too holy, not holy enough, or the name of that one boy who stole my turnips. But eventually, the baby is named, swaddled, and presented to the village, who will then promptly ignore the official name in favor of a nickname based on a birthmark, a habit, or whatever the baby did at their first feast. So you settle for something safe, something the priest can bless and the family can, mostly, agree on. And as your little Saint Edith, or Wilfred, or Storm, gurgles in your arms, you realize you've given them not just a name, but an entry ticket to the long, loud, and loving saga that is medieval family life. If nothing else, just be glad the family pig wasn't named first. Thinking about divorce? Think again. In the Middle Ages, your options are annulment, exile, or accidental plagues. Good luck explaining irreconcilable differences when the only acceptable reason is accidentally married your cousin again. Let's say your marriage is less fairy tale, more farce. Maybe your spouse is even worse at chores than you are. Maybe they have a suspicious fondness for your best wooden spoon, or perhaps they snore like a broken church bell. In a modern world, you'd just head to court, cite irreconcilable differences, and get on with your life. But medieval marriage law is a different beast entirely. For starters, marriage is less a private arrangement and more a binding social contract, witnessed by half the village and sanctified by the church. Once you've said your "I do," or at least nodded when the priest glared at you, the only way out is through loopholes, Latin, or divine intervention. The church takes a dim view of marital takebacksies. Marriage is for life, or until someone dies, whichever comes first, which, to be fair, could be next Tuesday. But suppose you're determined to escape your marital bliss. The most respectable option is annulment, which is sort of like hitting undo but with more paperwork and a priest who asks uncomfortable questions. You need a solid reason, and I just can't with his turnip obsession isn't going to cut it. Acceptable grounds include being too closely related, which, let's be honest, is entirely possible if your family tree is more of a shrub, not being of sound mind, your call, but good luck proving it. Or one of you was already secretly married to someone else. A bigger issue than you'd think, given medieval record-keeping. Annulments require witnesses, investigations, and a lot of waiting. Expect the local clergy to quiz everyone you've ever met about your wedding night, your parentage, and whether you actually meant forever when you said it. Your mother will be interviewed. So will the village midwife, the neighbour's cousin, and probably the family pig. The process is lengthy, expensive, and comes with no guarantee. Half the time, you're sent home with stern advice to try harder and maybe pray more often. If you're less patient, or less lucky, you could try the path of exile. This isn't so much a formal process as an informal solution. You simply vanish to another village, possibly with a new name and a story about a tragic bread-baking accident. The downside? Your absence will be the hottest gossip for a decade. And your spouse may or may not send the in-laws to fetch you back. Exile is usually reserved for more scandalous situations, adultery, criminal activity, or the aforementioned accidental cousin marriage, which, as the village scribe will tell you, happens more than it should. And then there's the medieval plague clause. Sometimes, fate intervenes. Sickness, famine, and general calamity mean that till death do us part is more of a practical timeline than a poetic ideal. In an era where life expectancy hovers somewhere between not long and don't make plans, a bad marriage might simply resolve itself. If you become a widow or widower, you'll have a mourning period of highly variable length, after which you're free to try your luck again, preferably with someone not related and with fewer unresolved turnip issues. As for outright divorce, the word doesn't really exist, at least, not for regular folks. Royals and the super wealthy sometimes persuade the Pope to grant a divorce, but unless you're in line for a crown, don't hold your breath. For most, medieval marriage is a lifelong adventure, with only the slimmest chance of early escape. So, if you're stuck with someone who talks to geese or snores in Gregorian chant, count your blessings, or maybe just double-check the family tree before your next wedding. In the Middle Ages, marriage might not be easy to get out of, but at least you'll have a lifetime to practice forgiveness, patience, and, if all else fails, selective hearing. The church takes marriage very seriously. If you stray, expect public penance, ruined reputations, and maybe a stint in the stocks. Adultery isn't just frowned upon, it's a full-time community event. Let's put it bluntly, faithfulness in medieval marriage is not just a personal virtue, it's a matter of public interest. Everyone is watching, the priest, the neighbours, your in-laws, the family dog. Your private business is basically village theatre, and adultery is a show no one wants to miss, unless, of course, they're in it. The rules are clear. Marriage is for life, and anything that looks even remotely like cheating is serious business. The church spends most Sundays reminding you about the dangers of straying from the marital path, usually in long sermons that somehow mention goats, fire, and eternal damnation in the same sentence. The priest is not just a spiritual leader, he's also the chief investigator, moral referee, and unofficial town gossip. If you so much as glance too long at the blacksmith's apprentice, expect a sermon by name, with the whole congregation sneaking glances at you. It's not just the church either. Medieval villages are tight-knit, with houses clustered close and walls that may as well be made of lace for all the privacy they offer. If you're spotted chatting too cheerfully with someone other than your spouse, rumours sprout faster than spring onions. The bread baker's wife saw you standing a little too close? It's tomorrow's headline. Someone notices you lingering in the churchyard after Vespers? You'll be confessing for weeks. Should you be foolish or unlucky enough to actually cross the line, the consequences are spectacularly public. The church deals with adultery using the two favourite medieval tools, shame and spectacle. Public penance is a given. You'll be summoned to the front of the congregation, made to wear something ridiculous, sackcloth is always in style, and forced to declare your sins with everyone watching, including your spouse, who has probably already told you exactly what they think, at length. The local stocks, those wooden devices that keep your hands and head conveniently available for tomato throwing, are another favourite. Spend a few hours there, and you'll hear everyone's opinions on your love life, your hygiene, and your taste in partners. If you're very unlucky, your punishment includes a parade through the streets, with the children jeering and your mother-in-law muttering about how she always knew you weren't right for her son. Reputation is everything. A hint of scandal can linger for years, colouring every conversation and ensuring your name is always first on the prayer list for those who have strayed. The local gossip network, led by Aunt Marjorie naturally, keeps meticulous records, ensuring your moment of indiscretion will be remembered long after the last turnip has been thrown. But medieval faithfulness isn't all doom and gloom. For those who stay true, there are rewards, at least, if you count marital stability and fewer sermons. The church encourages chaste affection, which in practice means holding hands only when milking cows or during times of national crisis. Flirtation is kept to a minimum, and everyone is keenly aware of which saint's day forbids any extra fun. Still, people are people. Secret glances, hidden letters, and the occasional moonlit rendezvous do happen, but getting away with it is an Olympic-level feat of deception, luck, and a very good alibi involving sheep. If caught, you're expected to confess, repent, and make amends, usually through a combination of fasting, prayer, and slightly less talking at family gatherings. For most, it's simpler and far less stressful to stick to the straight and narrow, save your best glances for your spouse, and hope you're never called out in a sermon. After all, medieval marriage is a team sport, and nothing builds trust like surviving another Sunday without being named from the pulpit. In the end, faith and fidelity aren't just about staying true. They're about surviving the scrutiny, the sermons, and Aunt Marjorie's relentless curiosity. And if all else fails, remember, confession is good for the soul, but avoiding public penance is even better. If your spouse catches a medieval bug, you're both in for the long haul, herbal poultices, leeches and prayers. Nothing says romance like applying ointment while your partner coughs up their last confession. Welcome to the reality of in sickness and in health, with a heavy emphasis on in sickness, forget modern medicine. The medieval toolkit consists of hope, home remedies, and the unshakable confidence of a village healer who learned everything from their grandmother and a suspiciously mouldy book. If you're unlucky enough to fall ill, your home transforms into a pop-up hospital minus the actual medicine and plus a lot of worried relatives who just want to watch. Symptoms begin innocently enough: a sniffle, a cough, maybe a mysterious rash that 3 aunts and a neighbour immediately diagnose as the bad air. Word travels fast, and soon the house is bustling with helpful advisors, all eager to offer treatments ranging from tried and true to possibly lethal. Aunt Marjorie arrives first, brandishing a pot of boiled nettles and a lecture about the dangers of night air. She's followed by the midwife, who brings a steaming poultice, several alarming stories, and a suspicious jar labelled simply ointment. If you're feeling brave, you try the herbal tea, a blend of mint, yarrow, and whatever was still green in the garden. If you're feeling desperate, you submit to the leeches who, it turns out, are much more enthusiastic about their job than you are. The local priest pops in, murmuring prayers and discreetly eyeing the family's only bottle of wine, ostensibly for anointing, but you know better. And through it all, you and your spouse get an intensive course in medieval caretaking. There's no calling in sick. Your spouse still needs to feed the animals, haul water, and keep the fire going. If you're lucky, someone volunteers to help with chores. If not, you work as a team, passing chores back and forth, sharing the bed and the germs, and perfecting the art of sleeping sitting up. Hygiene, such as it is, involves swapping out the straw on your mattress and praying nobody throws up on the good blanket. The patient is tucked in, bundled up with every scrap of fabric you own, and force-fed broth, gruel, or ale for strength. Airing out the room is encouraged, which means opening the door just enough to let the next draft, and half the neighbourhood's curious glances, in. Treatments are creative. If it can be mashed, boiled, or tied to the afflicted limb, it's considered medicine. Onion poultices, garlic necklaces, and mustard plasters are the highlights. Sometimes you hang a bag of herbs over the bed to ward off evil spirits, and sometimes you just burn the herbs to cover the smell. The family chicken is temporarily banished for stealing the healing bread, and the cat is deputized to sleep at the foot of the bed for extra luck. Of course, every ailment calls for confession. Nothing makes a cough sound worse than a visiting priest insisting it's time to make peace with God, just in case. Your spouse gamely mumbles through their sins, you squeeze their hand, and the midwife whispers nobody ever died of a cold except my cousin, but he was struck by lightning later anyway. Recovery, when it comes, is slow and communal. You and your spouse celebrate the first day without fever by eating actual food and taking turns standing in the sun. The neighbours drop by to offer congratulations and to remind you, gently, of the chores you missed. If things go badly, well, there's a new story for the village, a new name on the prayer list, and a new round of advice on how to avoid catching it this time. Surviving sickness in medieval marriage isn't for the faint of heart. It's teamwork under pressure, with a side of garlic breath and a lot of midnight prayers. But if you can make it through the fevers, the leeches, and Aunt Marjorie's boiled nettles, you can make it through almost anything, together. If you survive long enough to see wrinkles, congratulations, you're an elder. Retirement isn't a thing, but you do get to tell everyone how much harder things were in your day, while brandishing a suspiciously flexible walking stick. In medieval times, living past 35 means you've truly defied the odds. The life expectancy statistics are stacked against you, but here you are, creaky, wise, and somewhat surprised you've made it. You and your spouse are now the official old couple of the village, complete with matching aches, heroic stories of past winters, and a permanent seat closest to the fire, or at least the least draughty spot in the hut. Forget leisurely cruises or golden years spent playing shuffleboard. Medieval retirement means you keep working until you're physically incapable, or until a younger, slightly less creaky relative finally convinces you that carrying buckets is bad for your humours. Most days start with a joint assessment of which joints are still functioning. There's always a new pain. Is that my back or just the mattress? Did you always make that noise getting up? Whose turn is it to feed the chickens? And are we sure they remember us? But there's a quiet dignity to growing old together. You know each other's habits, strengths, and stubbornness. You can interpret a sigh, a grunt, or a raised eyebrow at 20 paces. Sometimes you finish each other's sentences. Other times, you start arguing and forget what the argument was about halfway through, which is a peaceful resolution by medieval standards. You gain privileges as an elder. The right to dispense wisdom, solicited or not, is yours. Younger villagers and your many descendants flock to hear tales of the Great Flood of 12, the winter of the never-ending mud, or the legendary day someone baked bread that actually rose. You embellish, your spouse corrects, and the children listen in awe, secretly calculating how many of the stories are true. With age comes a few small perks. You get first pick of the softest bench at feasts, and the honor of lighting the Yule log, carefully with help, and after much discussion about the proper way. When disputes arise, your word carries weight, especially if you phrase your advice as how it's always been done. Even Aunt Marjorie hesitates before contradicting you, and that's saying something. Your daily life slows, but it doesn't stop. You supervise chores, offer commentary on everything from garden layouts to marriage prospects, and occasionally sneak a nap in the sun, disguised as keeping an eye on the sheep. You and your spouse compare lost teeth, new grey hairs, and the latest rumours about who might be marrying whom next. Social status aside, old age is still a team sport. You support each other's slow steps and help remember where the good spoon went. You reminisce about your wedding, yes, the one where Uncle Reginald's recorder was confiscated after the third song, and about every turnip harvest since. Sometimes you quietly wonder how the two of you managed to outlast so many others. The winters, the fevers, the years the goat chewed through the door. The village children are in awe. "Did you really survive the plague?" they whisper, and you nod solemnly, enjoying your moment of glory, even if it was just a particularly bad bout of food poisoning. Your spouse chuckles, shakes their head, and tells the story with extra drama. At the end of each long, busy day, you sit by the fire, shoulder to shoulder, bones creaking, eyes drooping. You listen to the next generation clatter about, content in the knowledge that your days of chasing goats are, mostly, over. You fall asleep before the embers fade, grateful for one more night together in your shared straw mattress, with only a few minor interruptions from the family cat. In medieval marriage, growing old together is rare, difficult, and deeply satisfying. There's no retirement, but there's resilience, companionship, and the reward of knowing that, through everything, you've made it, side by side, and ancient at 35. When the end comes, it's rarely peaceful or poetic. You might inherit a goat, a thatched roof, and 3 extra children. And before you know it, Aunt Marjorie is back, matchmaking all over again. Death in the Middle Ages is more of a team event than a solo act. The whole village gets involved. When a spouse passes, there's barely time to catch your breath between the wailing, the prayers, and the practicalities. Your in-laws flood in, some with actual casseroles, most with opinions. There are tears, there are sighs, and there's always that neighbour who claims to have predicted the whole thing from the way the rooster crowed last Thursday. After the weeping comes the paperwork, medieval style. You're now a widow or widower, which is less of a title and more of a job description. Suddenly, you're responsible for managing the household alone, feeding the livestock, patching the leaks, and making sure nobody accidentally swaps the baby with the neighbour's piglet. If you're lucky, you inherit your spouse's modest collection of wooden spoons and, possibly, an IOU from cousin Bertram that's about as valuable as a promise from the village tax collector. The inheritance rules are complicated and mostly designed to ensure everyone is slightly unsatisfied. If you're a widow, you might keep the house, unless your late husband's relatives claim ancient rights to the thatch. If you're a widower, you inherit everything, including the debts, the garden full of stinging nettles, and a goat with unresolved emotional issues. Social life changes too. As a widow, you're immediately upgraded to eligible status by every matchmaker in a 3-village radius. Aunt Marjorie is suddenly at your door, chart in hand, pointing out the many attractive qualities of old Tom the Miller. Still has most of his teeth, only a slight limp, very generous with porridge. If you were hoping for a quiet mourning period, forget it. Widowhood is less about reflection and more about fending off casseroles, suitors, and the priest's polite inquiries about your plans for the next harvest. The community expects a period of mourning. This is a sliding scale. dependent on how much anyone liked your late spouse, the weather, and how many other funerals are scheduled that month. Black clothing is a must, though black is a strong word for a tunic that's really just less brown than usual. Mourning also means extra prayers, extra chores, and a steady supply of helpful advice from relatives who haven't visited in years but now feel moved to weigh in on your life choices. Children, if you have them, must be reassured and kept from redecorating the house in their grief or boredom. Extended family will offer to help, usually by rearranging your kitchen, rehoming the goat, or suggesting new names for the baby. If you've inherited stepchildren, congratulations. You've just added several extra layers of drama to your daily routine. Eventually, the dust settles. Life goes on. The garden still needs weeding, the roof still leaks, and the chickens, bless them, could not care less about human tragedy. The loneliness is real, but so is the freedom. You can now arrange the rushes however you want, eat porridge for every meal, and take a nap in the sun without anyone asking if that's wise at your age. But don't get too comfortable. Aunt Marjorie is back, and this time she's brought reinforcements. Suitors appear, the widowed baker with the legendary moustache, the sheep farmer whose only conversation is about wool prices, and the apothecary's apprentice who always smells faintly of onions. The cycle begins anew. The village loves nothing more than a second-chance romance, and before you know it, you're considering another wedding, another feast, and the prospect of sharing a straw mattress, fleas and all, with someone new. In the end, medieval love never really ends. It just changes shape, again and again, proving that, even after death, marriage is still a group activity. Welcome to culinary bliss, medieval style. Every dinner is an adventure in risk assessment. Is that a chicken, a very old turnip, or something that used to moo? There's no date night takeout, just the endless cycle of pottage, stale bread, and a mystery meat pie that could either bless you with protein or send you to the church for last rites. You and your spouse bond over the mutual terror of what's simmering in the pot, while silently praying the beer hasn't gone completely sour. Let's set the table. It's a wooden board, wiped down with the sleeve of someone's tunic, surrounded by whatever stools, buckets, or conveniently placed firewood you can wrangle. You and your beloved sit side by side, ladles at the ready, trying not to look suspiciously at the floating things in tonight's stew. Dinner in the Middle Ages isn't just a meal, it's a survival sport. Pottage is the centerpiece. Every night, every season. What's in it? Whatever you have. A few limp vegetables, maybe a piece of salted pork from last winter's pig, and always barley. Sometimes the pot is topped up day after day, so there's no telling how old that carrot really is. If you're lucky, you'll find something green, herbs, or maybe a weed that's technically edible and only slightly hallucinogenic. Bread is a staple, but don't picture golden loaves. Medieval bread is sturdy enough to be used as a weapon in a pinch. The best slices go to the elders, the children, and anyone who can still chew. The rest of you make do with trenchers, slabs of stale bread that double as plates and, eventually, as a late-night snack for the family pig. Meat is a rare treat and always suspect. If there's a meat pie, nobody asks too many questions. Is it rabbit? Chicken? The one-eyed creature you saw near the barn last week? Who can say? You've learned that the less you know, the easier it is to swallow. You and your spouse exchange nervous glances, each waiting for the other to take the first bite. If neither of you falls over within a minute, dinner continues. Vegetables are more reliable, except when they aren't. Turnips, onions, leeks, if they grow underground, they're on your table. Occasionally someone brings in a squash or cabbage, and it's a festival. Of course, sometimes you discover the vegetable was last year's harvest, and it's only being served now because it was found hiding at the bottom of the barrel. A little mold? Scrape it off. A strange smell? Add more garlic. Beer is the beverage of choice. It's safer than water, which is mostly just pond with extra steps. The beer is cloudy, a bit sour, and sometimes has things floating in it. If it's extra fizzy, it means someone dropped in the leftover yeast. If it's flat, it means you forgot to bribe the brewer this week. You and your spouse toast to your continued survival and the faint hope that next year's barley crop will be kinder. Dessert? Maybe a spoonful of honey, a piece of dried fruit, or, on feast days, a tiny cake, usually swiped by the children before you even know it's there. More often, dessert is just the joy of not finding a beetle in your bread. All of this is done in good humour, eventually. Dinner conversations veer between guessing what's in the stew, planning tomorrow's menu, pottage, surprise, and sharing the latest gossip. You and your spouse bond over culinary misfortune, inventing elaborate backstories for suspicious stews and competing to find the most creative way to describe stale bread. If nothing else, you're in this together. Two brave souls facing down another bowl of mystery meat, fortified by laughter, stubbornness, and the comforting knowledge that if dinner goes wrong, you can always blame it on the neighbour's goat. In medieval marriage, every meal is a leap of faith. Bon appétit, or at least good luck. In the Middle Ages, your neighbours aren't just nosy. They're the unofficial marriage inspectors, moral police, and 24/7 rumour mill. Every argument, side glance, and missing chicken is village news before sundown. If you so much as raise your voice or, scandal of scandals, walk outside not holding hands, Aunt Gwendolen is already spinning a tale about your marital decline. Keeping up appearances is less about love and more about avoiding another intervention at Sunday Mass. Privacy, in the modern sense, is a foreign concept. Your house is made of wattle and daub, basically medieval drywall with the acoustic insulation of a hollow gourd. The neighbours hear everything. Whispered sweet nothings, arguments about the price of onions, and the occasional midnight confession about who actually dropped the bread in the mud. If you think closing the door helps, you're just signalling that something juicy is happening. Aunt Gwendolen lives for that kind of intrigue. Every village has its patrol, that collection of aunts, widows, and retired cowherds who make it their life's mission to monitor everyone else's business. They gather at the well, on doorsteps, and at the market, always ready to swap updates on who's thriving, who's quarrelling, and who was seen limping home from the tavern with a mysterious smile. Arguments don't stay private for long. Even a sigh too loud over the pottage is a public event by breakfast. And it's not just quarrels. If you're caught walking home a little too quietly, someone decides you must be feuding. If you're laughing too much, someone wonders what you're hiding. If you dare to let your spouse fetch water alone, you've either given up on the marriage or you're definitely plotting something. Aunt Gwendolen and her crew will supply motives, timelines, and a full cast of suspects before you even finish the morning chores. Your wardrobe too comes under constant scrutiny. If your tunic is wrinkled or your spouse's hair is a little too wild, expect commentary. They say she stopped caring after the second child. Did you see the mud on his boots? A sign of neglect, if you ask me. The livestock get more leeway than you do. At least no one expects the goat to keep up appearances. On Sundays, it all comes to a head. You and your spouse file into church, sitting side by side as required, hands politely folded and expressions carefully neutral. The priest, who knows everything by the time he climbs into the pulpit, may or may not devote a sermon to the importance of harmony in the home, pointedly glancing in your direction every few minutes. The rest of the congregation does their best not to look, which of course means everyone is looking. Interventions are part of the package. If the rumour mill decides your marriage is on the rocks, expect a friendly visit from Aunt Gwendolen and her deputies. They'll bring bread, advice, and a list of marriages that failed because they didn't take the warnings seriously. Their solution to every problem: more public displays of affection, more shared chores, and, if all else fails, a village feast, so everyone can judge your dynamic in person. The upside to all this scrutiny? You're never alone. There's always someone to lend a hand, an ear, or a helpful spoonful of unsolicited advice. Your marriage, for better or worse, is a community affair. When you succeed, patch up a quarrel, rescue a lost chicken, or simply manage a genuine laugh over dinner, the whole village celebrates. When things get rough, at least a dozen hands reach out to pull you back together, even if it's just for the sake of a good story. So you learn the art of smiling through critique, holding hands just a beat longer, and pretending not to notice the faces pressed to the window. Because in the Middle Ages, love might be private, but marriage is a village production, gossip, judgment, and all. Holidays in medieval marriage aren't about romantic getaways. They're about endless feasting with family, elaborate rituals, and competitive piety. There's dancing, awkward parlour games, and so much church that you start dreaming in Latin. Your spouse's relatives descend in droves, ready to judge your bread, your outfit, and the size of your goose. Surviving the festivities together means you're officially stronger than half the couples in the county. Let's set the scene. The holiday bells ring, and your house, already packed tighter than a sausage, suddenly bursts at the seams. Cousins arrive with armloads of bread, uncles bring casks of questionably strong ale, and aunts parade in with enough pickled cabbage to ward off a small army. Every bed, bench, and scrap of rush is commandeered, and privacy evaporates like mist over the fields. The preparations begin weeks in advance. For weeks, your chores double as you sweep, bake, and attempt to decorate with whatever greenery the goat hasn't eaten yet. There are garlands of holly, bunches of herbs, and the occasional leftover onions strung up for luck. Your spouse tries valiantly to negotiate who's hosting which meal and where the best spot by the fire will be, but everyone knows Aunt Marjorie will get it anyway, since she's brought her own cushion. Feasts are central to every holiday, from Christmas and Easter to St. Swithin's Day. No one's sure what he did, but it's an excuse to eat extra pudding. As a couple, your job is to present a united front. One of you mashes turnips, the other fends off relatives trying to improve your pottage. Serving food becomes a spectator sport, as your efforts are rated on a scale of passable to remember that disaster last year. Meals are long, loud, and punctuated by rituals. There's grace before eating, prayers between courses, and at least one cousin who insists on singing every verse of a song nobody else remembers. The priest stops by, blesses the table, and not so subtly checks if you've donated enough bread this year. At some point, a parlour game is suggested, usually involving charades, riddles, or pinning something on someone blindfolded to uproarious laughter. Dancing is obligatory, and if you value your toes, you'll let your spouse lead. The youngest children hop about while the oldest adults sigh and tell stories about the dances of our youth, which, according to legend, involved more grace and fewer injuries. There's at least one moment every holiday where someone, often Uncle Reginald, tries to introduce a new dance and ends up toppling the cheese platter. Piety is on full display. Church services multiply around holidays, and you and your spouse find yourselves at Mass multiple times a day, kneeling, standing, kneeling again, and quietly praying for an early dismissal. The Latin chants start to creep into your dreams, and by the third sermon, you and your spouse have developed a secret code of eyebrow raises and subtle sighs to communicate your mutual exhaustion. Family judgment is relentless. Your bread is compared to every loaf baked in a 3-mile radius. Your tunics are inspected for stains and creative patching. The size and flavour of your holiday goose become the stuff of legend, and later, possibly, scandal. Your ability to endure all this without a public meltdown is a badge of honour. But for all the stress, there are moments of genuine joy. You and your spouse catch each other's eyes across the crowded table and share a smile, the rare kind that says, "At least we're in this together." You sneak a bite of honey cake in the kitchen, laugh at the latest family drama, and collapse into bed at night, exhausted but triumphant. Surviving the holidays as a medieval couple is the ultimate test of teamwork, patience, and the ability to keep a straight face while Aunt Marjorie recites her favourite psalm for the 5th time. If you can weather the onslaught of relatives, ritual, and relentless judgment together, your marriage is basically invincible. At least until next year. Nightfall brings a new set of marital challenges. The drafty house groans, livestock snore under the bed, and you both pray the roof holds until morning. If you're not dodging leaks, you're wrestling for a scrap of blanket with someone whose feet could be legally classified as weapons. Every night is a lesson in patience, acrobatics, and the fine art of pretending not to hear the rats chewing through your shoes. As dusk settles over the village, the air grows colder and the house grows louder. Medieval homes are not known for their soundproofing, so every creak, howl, and nocturnal clatter echoes off the rough wooden beams. You and your spouse eye the ceiling, waiting for the first drip from the thatch. The family's one good bucket is on standby, ready to catch leaks, or at least ready until the goats commandeer it for their own mysterious purposes. Preparing for bed is its own nightly ritual. You brush aside the worst of the crumbs and hay from your shared straw mattress, shake out the blanket in case anything living has moved in since breakfast, and attempt to flatten the lumps. The blanket, a patchwork miracle weighing more than both of you combined, offers warmth and also serves as a test of upper body strength. You pull, your spouse pulls, and somewhere in the middle you both end up with half a cover and an unspoken agreement, not to mention the hole that lets in a constant stream of cold air. If you're lucky, you've managed to chase most of the livestock out from under the bed, but there's always one hen who sneaks back in, settling under your feet with a satisfied cluck. The family dog claims a spot by the hearth, the cat sprawls across your pillow, and the goat, defeated but determined, curls up by the door. All are ready to sound the alarm at the slightest nocturnal disturbance, or to trample your toes in the rush for an early breakfast. Sleep is an athletic event. Every movement risks waking your spouse, the animals, or the baby who seems to sense the exact moment you finally drift off. If you move too quickly, the mattress shifts, the straw crunches, and a cloud of dust rises, just in time to make you sneeze. On stormy nights, wind whistles through every gap, and you both clutch the blanket, praying the roof holds and hoping the neighbour's cow doesn't blow through the front door again. And then, the true terrors begin. Rats, emboldened by darkness and the faint smell of forgotten bread crusts, stage their nightly raids. You lie perfectly still, pretending not to hear the soft chewing at the foot of the bed, while your spouse invents elaborate excuses for why it's definitely not their turn to scare them away. If you're feeling brave, you bang on the wall with a shoe, which mostly just gives the rats something new to chew on. Nightmares come in many forms. Sometimes it's the memory of last week's dinner. Sometimes it's the dread that you forgot to lock the chicken coop, or the fear that the in-laws will appear before sunrise to offer more marital advice. But the real challenge is surviving until dawn with your dignity and your toes intact. Still, there are moments of peace. In between the shifting and scratching, you and your spouse share a quiet laugh, a whispered story, or a silent agreement that, no matter how many animals are in the bed, you wouldn't trade this life for all the soft pillows in Christendom. Well, maybe just one. A pillow without straw poking through would be nice. When morning finally comes, you emerge, rumpled, bleary-eyed, and triumphant. Another night survived. Another round of acrobatics, livestock wrangling, and blanket battles behind you. In medieval marriage, sleep isn't guaranteed, but togetherness is. And if nothing else, you're stronger, sneakier, and far more skilled at rat detection than you ever thought possible. Sleep tight, just don't let the chickens bite. So here we are, at the end of another long, slightly itchy medieval day. You've survived the dowries, the wedding feast, the turnip-related arguments, and at least 2 uninvited geese in your marital bed. You've endured awkward advice from a priest, slept side by side on a straw mattress, and navigated the endless labyrinth of in-laws, livestock, and laws that seem invented just to make life a little more confusing. Tonight, as you lay in your clean, quiet bed, one with actual privacy, fresh sheets, and no relatives loudly tucking you in, maybe take a moment to appreciate the small luxuries. indoor plumbing, central heating, the right to choose who you love, or at least who you share the remote with. No one is demanding a dowry of geese for your affection. No one is judging your marriage based on your ability to churn butter, recite prayers in Latin, or wrestle a pig out of the kitchen. It's easy to laugh at the misery, struggle, and daily absurdities of medieval marriage. But remember, every odd tradition, every impossible rule, and every awkward family dinner was survived by someone just as stubborn, hopeful, and occasionally ridiculous as we are now. These were people who made it through together, somehow finding joy between the leeches and the livestock. So tonight, as you drift off, be grateful for love on your own terms, for a bed that doesn't crunch, and for a world where your worst marital worry is whose turn it is to do the dishes. Whisper a quiet thank you to the generations before you, who endured, who adapted, and who paved the way, one awkward medieval marriage at a time. Sleep well, dream softly, and remember, in the great lottery of history, you've already won the marital jackpot. Good night.